So our next segment is called The Future Fit CFO. And we have two CFOs who serve and lead two very different organizations. Both speakers' full biographies can be found in the Hoover app, but I'll start with Tim Herrod, who is a member of IFAC's Professional Accountants in Business Advisory Group. And he's currently a consultant, but prior to that, he was a CFO leading strategic transformations in organizations that he worked for. Tim is also a member of CPA's Advisory Board for Sustainable Business and the Institute of Supply Management Thought Leadership Council in Canada. And he's joined by Mrs. Sonya Alleyne, who is the CFO and Head of Operations of the Barbados Family Planning Association, which is a nonprofit organization in Barbados. Sonya is a real Caribbean citizen, born in Guyana, lived in Antigua, and now is settled in Barbados with her husband and son, who's actually studying overseas in Canada. Her career obviously exposed her to several aspects of the accounting profession across different industries, but now her passion for service is kind of married with her day job. And she's also involved in the breast cancer program in Barbados, but she's also a longstanding Rotarian, and she's about to become the district governor for her district. So congratulations to you, Sonya. So we'll invite them both to share their perspectives. We'll have some time, hopefully at the end, for your questions. And over to you, Tim.
Thank you very much. Very nice to meet everybody today virtually. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. Just as a setup here, I'm going to get I have a short 5 slides to run through. Hopefully it's short. My lens on this topic is really from the last 25 years in various diverse roles. I started off from a perspective in Big Four firms, went to a large publicly traded company, worked for 14 years at Potash Corp, the world's largest fertilizer company. We were on the front lines of integrated reporting when it was not cool. We were a best practice leader 10, 15 years ago, and learned a lot in an investor relations role, led a treasury transformation after, led procurement transformations after that, and have been doing that. So my lens on the finance function, the value of the finance function really comes from there. And I don't, from the perspective of value, I think I'd like to really frame and what the Professional Accountants in Business Advisory Group for IFAC is really focused on when we think about active professional accountants in both private and public sectors, serving in different kinds of roles. We really are trying to position the profession and the future of the profession in a way that is going to set us up for success, going to attract the best talent, really is going to align the profession with where value is and is going, and what stakeholders' expectations are changing towards, and with COVID, the accelerating change in expectations of stakeholders and what value is and how it's delivered responsibly by organizations. So I'm going to I hope that this is going to work from advancing slides. Can you just trying to see if, yeah, there we go. So 4 major themes just in these 5 slides. The first is going to be about value and the shift from tactical and sort of what was done for hundreds of years to a more strategic value delivery expectation. We're going to talk about orientation, and if you think about a horizon or a plane, accountants are perceived in the marketplace of being, sort of looking at the past, accounting for the past, what has already happened. I believe the orientation, and we're talking a lot about the orientation changing to be a future orientation, and talk about roles then, what that means if you think about value delivery and sustainment as well as a future orientation. What does it mean as you position the finance function, the CFO's leadership, modeling the way for the organization closer to the business versus being sort of a budget and forecast and policy police. And finally, what does it mean in terms of skills and capabilities? I like to speak, now there are many value frameworks we were all taught and probably have been practicing for many years. This is one, and I think it's a good one to talk about from the perspective of what is what is expected from finance, what's expected from the CFO. I think the framework, when you think about organizational value creation and sustainment, we really have to think long and hard about customer value, business value, stakeholder value in a new way. What we're trying to be, what we're trying to do for our customers as a business, how it impacts strategy development and execution, what behaviors the organization have and are perceived to have, how capital is invested and allocated in those things is changing rapidly. So I'll orient you to the sort of the bottom left of this screen, and this is going to come in parts. The ticket to play for the finance function has always been to be good at cost, be good at cost, be good at cash, be good at capital. And it is, how do we create visibility for the organization? How do we analyze? How do we reduce risk? How do we create governance? And how do we do that by looking at how cash moves, how transactions happen, and that sort of thing. Now, the reality in the business now is a lot of that used to take a lot of people, take a lot of manpower, took a lot of skills to understand how to do that. We went to market, we said, this is a valuable skill set to have, is how to manage those things on this lower bar. That is rapidly changing. Those things can increasingly be automated. That is sort of the past. That is the orientation that I mentioned earlier, but it is a must. It still is the ticket to play for an accountant. The reality is, though, you don't need that many people doing that anymore. We need to take the lower value, what is perceived by stakeholders as lower value activities, automate, get really lean at those things, and redirect the human capital up the value framework, and really get into things that drive growth, drive profits optimization. And the question is, how do we move the profession? How do we move our finance function to really help the business understand on the front line in their day-to-day decision making, in their annual strategic planning, what to do and not do? What will maximize customer value? What won't? How best to understand what creates stickiness, what products to do, what is we had been doing some of those things, but we were doing them in the background. They may or may not have been paid attention to. Now we have to move it much closer to where the decisions are being made and much closer to the customer and support that day-to-day stuff. That will drive revenue. The more that we can move the function and the profession up to the revenue line and actually driving that, the more value will be perceived to be. And then the most valuable location of the finance function, and what's really going to drive the next 10 years, is this perceived value. This is about brand and reputation and what enhances that. What are the behaviors going on in the organization? How are we measuring those things like brand, like reputation, like the capability to innovate, like our behaviors and environmental, social, and governance in our communities? How are we differentiating ourselves with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion? How do we, we should be able to really help our leaders understand, and the organization understand, how to measure that stuff, how to value that stuff, how to report that stuff, and then how to be accountable for it in audits and look at it that way. So the whole value model and the orientation of the accounting function, the finance function, the CFO has to be a lot more strategic. So we get into this mindset of being a chief value officer and being future oriented versus past oriented. And what does it mean in terms of living that mindset of creating value, thinking in an integrated way, reporting in an integrated way, and supporting that decision making. So we're really trying to emphasize this future orientation and quantitative and qualitative full value decision making, really being able to rapidly adapt to stakeholder expectations of value, as I mentioned. And this really is, there are two parts to this. This is the number one, what value and service in what I mentioned are we providing to the business? The other piece is, how are we actually managing our own function to do that? How are we enabling low value activities in costs and human resources and systems to be able to do those things in an automated way, so we can redirect in more valuable ways, the human capital, and then be very attractive to the marketplace when we say to students, we have very interesting work to do. It's very valuable to the business. It's not going to be, you're not at risk because it's going to be automated out, but we've oriented the function and the profession to the higher value things. So modern processes, digital tools for that lean function. The stuff in the past can be automated, and we can really get people focused on the current and the future value decisions. How do we provide risks and opportunities? This is the Chief Value Officer mindset again. How do we create new models for intangibles like relationships, customer value, customer stickiness, intellectual capital, innovation capabilities, those differentiators, sustainability, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. How are we doing those things? And how then are we doing some of the more traditional accounting things, measuring those things that haven't happened yet, and reporting those. So I think when we think about those, those potential roles, we have, every organization is going to be different. IFAC has a study and a report on future fit accountants that it did not that long ago, and it talks about 7 different potential roles, and every organization may have a different mix of what roles it needs to be able to maximize and sustain business value. You might have finance leaders and finance people that are along with the business. You may have those that are more visionary and helping inform strategy. You're going to have those that are working day to day, trying to understand what tools are most valuable to do this stuff. What digital tools, what data governance rules, how much trust needs to be delivered in that. We're going to have folks who are experts in business process improvement, understanding and aligning business processes so that they can be enabled with the right digital tools. We have to get very good at storytelling and talk about capabilities here on my last slide. We have to really understand risks to brand and enablers of brand. And at the end of the day, what doesn't change, no matter what, is we have to be the trusted professional for third parties and internally. So there are lots of choices to make. There'll be different roles and different balances of roles. But I think it's going to be really, really important for us to when we think about the future, to really understand that this is all about the talent. What we are able to do, we can't just show up at the table, ask for a seat at the table, talk about our credentials, and then not be able to deliver. So to be able to deliver for those stakeholders, we need to really grasp that there are new skills and capabilities that we have to have. And those skills and capabilities are really important when you're going end to end through a life cycle of an accountant. And a life cycle, when somebody starts as an entry-level person and winds up the CFO, there's a lot of different things that you have to come to the table with. The world is more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous than it ever has been before. But yet, I think the accounting profession is best positioned out of all of the professions to be able to define what high-quality decision-making looks like, what it takes to do that in an unbiased way, that trust can be expanded, not just sustained. And when we think about the blend of interpersonal skills, you can't be sort of the bean counter in the corner anymore. And I talk informally, so I apologize for that. But the perception the world has of accountants needs to be, we are a driver of sustainable value. And we are helping the organization navigate these VUCA, what I call the VUCA world. And what that means, we have to be leaders. We have to be able to grasp with vision and ambition, purpose, inspiration, empowerment of the team and of the organization. And we have to be really self-aware about how we fit and what's going on in the organization. We have to have new business skills. We can't just look at the past and say debits, this is how a balance sheet looks and debits equal credits. Okay, systems can do that. We have to really understand the business, understand the problems, understand the opportunities, and help our users in the business unlock that value with our analysis capabilities, our digital capabilities. We have to be great partners to be able to do that. We need new communication and collaboration skills. We have to understand what it means to build partnership and trust in relationships, be storyteller, negotiate and influence without authority. These used to be soft skills or pervasive skills in competency maps for CAs and CPAs. These are now core skills. So that has changed. We've always had to be good at analysis. I think that, the way that we use systems and tools to enable us to be our partners in analyzing data, analyzing business process flaws and improving them in supporting decision making, that hasn't changed, but the tools have changed. Technical skills, we have to, those are changing rapidly, and then technology is changing rapidly. So there's so many different sort of, when you look at that value model and say, what is it going to mean for us as a profession? I think there's a lot that we have to do. There's a lot that we have to recreate. CPA Canada and IFAC are actively working hard at the future of the profession kinds of things like this, and operationalizing observations, operationalizing these things in our competency maps, where we're going to attract and retain students, make them professionals that are really focused on the new core skills that allow them to adapt, allow them to work in the way that's the most valuable for organizations, and really secure the future of the profession for hundreds of thousands, or in the case of IFAC, 3.5 million members across and around the world. So that's my introductory talk. I'll pass it over to Sonya to give her thoughts, and then I guess we're going to open the floor up for conversation. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Tim. Just wanted to say that from my perspective in the NGO sector, all those things apply that Tim talked about. We, however, have that dynamic situation where our funding is never the same every year. We can't predict. COVID was the biggest indicator of that, where all our plans went through the door. We had to be nimble on our feet with our forecasting. We had to constantly engage with our partners, our donors. And that was me, the CEO, the CFO, having to really step in and talk to those donors and partners internationally from a revenue perspective, but also from our expenses. How do we continue to sustain our operations while the pool is dwindling, while our communities that we serve are being pushed to the background because healthcare is not really big at this time. Sexual and reproductive healthcare, to be specific, was not important. We were dealing with COVID and the fallout from there. What we have to do is make sure that as the leadership, the financial leadership of the organization, that we were constantly looking for ways to innovate. We had to be always on the lookout for new funding opportunities, for new ways of doing business, because this is not business as usual. So I endorse everything that Tim has put on his slides, and I thank him for those slides. But we have to, it is not the bean counter accountant that we are anymore. We are the empathetic finance professional who looks to ensure that the money is spent in a way that is beneficial to all. So the donors, our stakeholders, our internal stakeholders who are our staff, and our external stakeholders who are our community that we serve. So those are my opening comments as well, and thank you very much for having me today.
Okay, so why don't I jump in here and maybe pose a couple of questions to you? And what I'm curious about is that transition that you all made, because you all started in the profession, obviously, as someone's accountant, someone's junior, and obviously not having the context that we're in now with the pandemic and everything else. You made that shift mentally in who you were, and identify that you needed to change and evolve the role you played for the organizations you played. I think that what I observe a lot of are obviously accountants who are professional accountants who are working in organizations, but haven't been given. So it's how do you take that opportunity? How do you make that shift in your own mindset so that you can show others that you're capable of more? Let's put it that way. Sonia, do you want to start? I always let female.
It's always challenging to move from.
Can you hear me, Sonia?
Hi, are you hearing me?
Okay, Tim, if you can hear me, you can go ahead.
I can hear Sonia.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sonia. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I was saying that, you know, it's hard to see yourself as the CFO when you are the audit junior, but the experiences that you have along the way, the interactions, and I mean, I keep saying all the time, the stuff that I went through coming through the firm really prepared me to meet the wider community. Some of the things I thought were really very restrictive, and I really fought, you know, being pigeonholed into that little box that says, okay, you can only wear black, you must only ever look up when the senior partner comes in. I didn't want to be that person. So I made it my business to experience and to be trained, to go and talk to the people who I thought were the examples of in industry that I wanted to be like. So it prepared me. It also, my extracurricular life also prepared me for the experiences. So that's me.
Sorry. I apologize. Should know that already after 16 months of this. Yeah, what I was saying, I started to say is that from my perspective as an audit, you know, starting off auditing cash, and you know, you have no idea when you start. I agree with what Sonia said, what you could wind up being. And I've taken many left turn, like very hard left turns and right turns, and I was a little bit probably different at the time. And my willingness to do that, I think now when I look at students coming out of university, and when they are choosing professions that, you know, back then, you know, it's like, man, I know that this is the linear path that will get me somewhere. I think now they come up with much higher expectations of being provided opportunities. And the mindset is there that it's like, I want to do valuable work. I know what tools can do, and I don't want to do that stuff. I want to do this more interesting stuff. And sometimes that's a hard lesson to teach them, that they still have to roll up their sleeves and do some hard work. But at the end of the day, the mindset coming out today is different. And I think a lot of entry level folks are wired a bit differently than just with knowledge and experience. And, you know, back when I came out, we didn't have this internet this way. We didn't have this much exposure to what was possible, and this much expectation of balance and other things that we just as employers have to provide people today. So with that, we have to create interesting paths, and we have to show people how they can evolve in their life cycle, and we have to support them as a profession and plan for different stages of their careers to say, you know, here are your options, and here's all the interesting things you can do at each stage on the way to. And many of them don't want to be CFOs, but they want to do valuable work and valued work and have impact in their way. So it's just, the world is 100% different than it was, and we have to adapt to that.
Okay, so with that in mind, think about persons like me who've been in the profession 30 years plus. If I had to think about all of the things that are important and that are disrupting our profession, to me, one of my biggest tools would be having the right team below me, which isn't something per se that means I have to go out there and know about everything, but I have to know where I'm getting that information from. So maybe you can share with me, I start with you, Tim, you know, how you went about doing that in terms of your role, because I think you're obviously only as good as your team, but it's really important to have those skills to make sure that overall finance function is doing that value creation that you spoke about.
Yeah, the way, and I lead transformations, still am, and I have a new role that I'm taking. And the first question of my new employer, I said, what, like 100-day plan, and I need to frame this out. What do you think needs to be the first thing we work on? And it was people. And it is very clear to the business. It's very clear to the function. It's very clear to stakeholders externally and the board that the jobs to be done probably haven't changed. So the what isn't changing, but the how is changing substantially. And so the reality of when you look at a team is that you can't fire everybody. I mean, that's this idea that consultants have or others have, that this is an easy thing, just go get new talent and get new capabilities, that's just not feasible for almost any organization anywhere. So what you do is you look at your curve and you say, okay, who are the superstars and who are the folks that are going to have a harder time, you know, skill versus will, can't do, won't do. And then you have to figure out a plan for development and investing in your people. So what are the jobs to be done? What are the current capabilities relative to the future? And how are we going to be very strategic about what we give who, and how they can be reskilled as necessary, with particular, like all the things that I mentioned before. People really focus on digital. Digital has been infecting us for many, many years, decades. Okay, the digital things are just coming faster. The opportunities to use data and digital are coming faster and are growing exponentially. But what we need to do is, you know, in terms of finding people that are adaptable, teaching them new strategic skills, new tactical skills, new digital skills, those kinds of things. That's 80% of what you're going to do is work with what you have and help them. And it is possible. We do it every day. It's amazing, both in the business and in the function. We find people adapting, new tools. There's ways to make it easier from a user interface, user experience perspective, and there's partners that can help. But it is, you have to go through that process. What's the future job? What do we have? What are the gaps that we need to fill? And how strategically do we go about filling the most important gaps first, second, third? Sonya?
Okay, Sonya, do you want to share your perspectives?
So I'd just like to say that you have to have the passion for what you want to do. In my business today, it's half of my battle is passion, and the other half is flexibility. Seeing what we have and what the skill set we need. Once you want to achieve that the person has to want. Our pool is small, so you have to be able to really look at the people that you have, critically analyze them, and use the opportunities of mentoring and teaching to bring their skill set up. We have an opportunity to make a huge impact on people's lives, and I don't want the wrong people with me. I can't fire them, but I certainly can reassign them somewhere else where they're not affecting what the face of the organization is. So passion and flexibility for me is where it's at. I'm going to say that, so since Lisa's is coming on, I'm just going to say that, we have an opportunity to make a wonderful difference in the life of someone who is wavering on the point of a financial background, a finance background, and not about you don't be that person who just is stayed on the path. You want them to realize that this is fabulous stuff and exciting and new to come.
Thank you, Sonya.
100% echo.
Tim?
100% echo that. There is no profession better suited to face the future than this one. There isn't, and we should be attracting the A students. We should be supporting them. We should be giving them super interesting work, because that's what it is. You know, when PwC announces they're hiring 100,000 people to do ESG stuff, that should be 100,000 accountants. Like this is, when we think about what the opportunity is, it is massive, and we got to get on the front lines of building and transmitting that excitement all day, every day to folks, you know, considering, as Sonya said, the profession.
I think that is a perfect way to end the segment. Again, I'm going to take some of what you said and put it on a t-shirt. So thank you both for being with us this morning. Thank you for sharing, and wish you all the best and have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our